Coming up on this episode of Flirtations, we're talking about differences, conflict, and do the little things matter in dating? That's right. With our guest, psychotherapist and marriage coach, Carrie Cohen, we get going right away with the question, why do opposites attract? How can we make our differences work for us in dating and relationships? Carrie also has a great breakdown of the anxious avoidant dynamic here I think you'll find really interesting. But that's not all. We're going to talk about different approaches to conflict, like when one person wants to resolve things right away and the other doesn't, can create tension, but also offer opportunities for growth. Communication is a big theme today, whether it's figuring out how to ask for more or just learning how to navigate conflict without always needing to be right. Oh, some of us need that. Not me, not me. And of course, we'll discuss whether the little things in dating actually matter and how they play a role in creating a lasting connection. From navigating the honeymoon phase to building a strong foundation for the long term, we're exploring our differences that come up in dating and how they can ultimately strengthen or challenge a connection. All right, flirties, let's meet Carrie.
I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. Hello, my name is Benjamin. I'm the flirt coach and a gay Libra. Everyone has an inner flirt.
Hey, flirty.
Live, laugh, flirt.
Work the flirt.
Work the flirt. Delulu is the Salulu. Expert on the flirt.
Hey, flirty. There's always another flirt.
Everyone has an inner flirt. Get out of your head and into the flirt.
Flirties, on the show today, we have licensed psychotherapist and marriage coach Carrie Cohen as we talk about our differences and conflict and early dating. Hello, Carrie.
Hi, Benjamin. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being on the show today. How are you doing?
I'm excellent. Actually, I didn't used to be able to say that on a Monday, but I can now.
No Monday blues for us as we're recording this. Yes, getting ready for this conversation as this is one of the biggest topics that I don't feel like I've talked about on Flirtations just yet, at least in its standalone episode about navigating our differences in dating. It's a big one.
That.
It's a big one. And so we had a little bit of a meet cute moment virtually a few years ago. I love when these connections come full circle and I have people or am able to connect with people and have them on Flirtations that we've, gotten to know each other a little bit in the past. So how did we first meet? Gosh, almost over 3 years ago.
Yeah, 3 years ago, IIN health coaching.
That's right.
Right. We were in a cohort together.
I remember that. Yeah, we did some of our early coaching training certifications together through IIN Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And yeah, we were in one of our small groups together. Yeah, trading, coaching ideas, business ideas. And it's so cool to connect back in this way.
I agree. I love how we can come full circle in that way. So yes.
Yeah, me as well. And though we both started in coaching at about the same time, you were really in this world of dating and relationships for a long time, or for a while before that. So if you could share with the flirties how you got started in this work of relationships.
I would love to. So I personally have been married for 20 years. So it's been a long time since I've dated. That was pre apps actually. But I've been a practicing psychotherapist for 25 years, and relationships and couples work has been one of the areas that I've spent a lot of time focusing on. And within that, attachment styles and the nervous system. So it is an area. I was married and divorced in my 20s and really wanting to take a look at my own internal conflicts and how I was choosing who I was choosing. Because in the end, what I realized looking back was that first marriage was not a good fit for me. No one really had conversations with me about how to do that and how to make that happen.
Yeah.
And so I then, after finding and marrying my soulmate, I've spent a lot of years thinking about, reflecting on, studying just the nuance of relationships and what comes up at all stages of relationships. And So yeah, and it's really my focus in my own work, which is relationships, couples who are wanting to deepen and resolve internal conflicts and external conflicts, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of the flirties are going to relate to that, as there's no real blueprint or guide for how do you do this? How do you date? How do you make those connections if you're trying to maybe model your dating lives after what you see on TV and movies, social media, maybe family, parents, grandparents. But if you don't have really solid examples or any examples to look to, it's like you're trying to figure it out, and it's really freaking confusing.
Yeah, I agree. I have a handful of clients who are 20 somethings, 25-ish, and they're navigating that. And it's challenging. I mean, it's really challenging. And especially when we're not mind readers and you have really no idea what other people are thinking. So yeah, I'm excited for this discussion.
Me too. Me too. And what really was the catalyst for this idea is I recorded an episode a little while ago about the Enneagram, and the guest I had for that conversation was really talking about it's our differences that allow for that growth, that, you know, we're dating and we look to what we have in common. We look to our similarities, where it's like, oh, you like French fries? I like French fries. You're from North Carolina. I'm from North Carolina, right? You like rom-coms? Me too. And so you bond and you connect over what you have in common, which is fantastic. That is how you can really build intimacy and trust and all of these really good, feel-good emotions. But it's our differences, and how are we... Yes, when we maybe butt heads a little bit, or we're trying to figure out communication styles, attachment styles even, that really lends itself to some beautiful growth. So that was, yes, the idea that spawned in my mind a while ago for this episode today.
I like that. I like talking about also really why opposites attract. So yeah.
Okay, let's get into some questions now about differences. Maybe starting with that one. Why do you think opposites tend to attract?
So generally speaking, here's how we are drawn to people. So on the conscious level, we've got the obvious things, the aesthetics, their sense of humor, the things we have in common, right? Those are the surface level conscious reasons that draw us to people. It's really the unconscious draw where we see how opposites attract. So you have something in your personality or your way of being that I don't have, and I subconsciously recognize that I need more of that. Or you have something in your personality that I don't have, that I don't want to actually manifest. So I would like to partner up with you, and you can be the other half. So quick example. So an example for the first one, if we say, you have, let's just take a classic type A and type B. So a type A might be drawn to a type B person. So someone who's very high strung, very detail oriented, very organized, type A, they might be drawn to a type B partner because they know subconsciously they need more of that in their life. Because if they have another person like them, they will be on edge all the time. So they will be drawn to someone like that because they know that that would be a great mix. And they want more of that. They want to relax more. They want to color outside the lines. Now, that is usually not a conscious choice for people, and unless they're working with someone and they've identified those things. And now the latter, we are drawn to someone who manifests something that we don't want to actually manifest. So a classic one of this is like someone who's really conflict avoidant might be drawn to someone who's not afraid of conflict, because then they've got they can bring the big guns in. So it's like if they have to deal with people and they're very conflict avoidant, they don't want to, they can just defer to their partner and let their partner handle it. So there really is a psychology behind why opposites attract. And then we create the synergy. The caveat here, though, is that the very thing that draws you to that person is the thing that also becomes the Achilles heel of the relationship. So we have to make that difference work synergistically for us. Otherwise, the default is we'll just butt heads. And you could just see that from the example, from my two examples, the type A and the type B. If they if the type A doesn't come to appreciate the relaxed, laid back partner, they will be constantly annoyed with them.
Okay.
So
That
we have to
makes
appreciate what
sense.
they bring to the table. So yes, there is definitely good, solid reasoning behind why opposites are drawn to each other.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe in that example, it's like the type A may be like, why don't you show up more, right? Why don't you seem to
Why aren't
care
you more
more?
ambitious? Why don't
Yeah.
you see the crumbs on the floor? Why don't you
Yeah.
make the bed? Why don't you put the pillow, things like that.
Yeah. Okay. And then the more type B person may be like, why are you maybe controlling me? Or why are you,
Why are you so micromanaging? Like,
uh,
gosh, like, do you hear yourself? And also, frankly, I didn't see the crumbs on the floor.
yeah.
So yes, it is definitely a challenge, but I would say having two of the same is more challenging in the end.
Okay. How so? It's well, I mean, yeah. So let's say you have two type A's.
Two type A's.
Yeah.
Ooh,
How might that challenge present itself?
having two of me would drive me insane, I think. Two type A's, it's like two bosses, I mean,
Yeah.
two
Yeah.
alphas. It's like, somebody's got to defer, somebody's got to be the laid back one. Otherwise, you're such a super high strung couple.
Right.
Now
Right.
that happens. And two type B's, it's like, I don't know, maybe nothing gets done. Nobody's really
Mm-hmm.
mobilized.
Mm-hmm.
The ambition is not really there.
Mm-hmm.
If when I think about couples, I think about a yin and a yang, and I think
Yeah.
about they're each sort of bringing something to the table, and we need to be able to create a synergy. If that couple can't create a synergy and work together with their complementary attributes, then they're not going to make it.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And I imagine you see these dynamics play out in your work with couples all the
Yes,
time.
all the time.
All the time.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say these dynamics tend to present themselves in the dating process as well, or do they maybe reveal themselves over time?
No, I would say they present themselves in the dating process as well.
Mm.
People I find who are dating are even more pickier. I'm just thinking about the funny show, the series, The Indian Matchmaker that I watched. And the matchmaker, her name, they called her Auntie. She would
Yes.
say to the guests that she was matchmaking, she would say, "Oh, okay, that's too long of a list. You probably get about 60% of what you want."
Yeah.
And these women, it was usually women, they were mortified. They're like, "What do you mean 60%? I want all of this." And so what I find in the dating arena, and this goes for men too, because I work with solo men also, is that they have this long list of things that they want. And they're really not willing to compromise because they feel like that is settling. Now, there's a difference between compromising and settling. And there's a difference between settling and having realistic expectations. And what I find in the dating world, and here's what I say to my clients, is this person someone who you could see could grow with you? Are they pliable? Are they adaptable? Are they moldable? Or are they pretty much set in their ways and they are not changing? Because if it's the latter, then, and if they have things you don't like, then you might as well forget about it. But if they are adaptable and open to change and have really more of a growth mindset, then so much is possible. I can't say anything is possible, but because we also have to acknowledge that we have limitations in our personality, but so much is possible. So I would say these things show up in dating. They show up when you start living together. They show up when the relationship gets serious. And I will tell you that it's probably the first experience of disillusionment in couplehood when you first realize like, oh, this person isn't actually as perfect as they thought they were. And that's really the crossroads for couples. Are they going to continue going, or is that going to be the end of it? It's really the first disillusionment stage when we see that.
Okay. And do you think it's maybe like some of the like what's coming to mind is right the honeymoon phase of dating where it's like you've got all the feel good hormones, chemicals, all that good stuff is flowing, and you tend to just, if things are going really well and there's really an absence of conflict and things are just flowing, right? That first opportunity or first glimpse into what makes someone maybe more human. Yeah. Like, wait a second.
that is the moment of disillusionment when because the reality is that not even so much consciously, but subconsciously, we're all putting our best foot forward. I mean, imagine if we weren't. Like, how much would people actually couple up if we were like letting all of our real raw selves hang out from the moment we met
Yeah.
somebody. No, we're on our best behavior.
Yeah.
And so hopefully we're being real, but on our best behavior. Maybe not like saying the first thing that comes to our mind, maybe like pausing and censoring a little bit. And so what happens though is it could be anywhere from 6 months to 2 years when the honeymoon stage ends. It just depends on how fast the couple moves. And I tell couples it's always better to move slower, because the more time you can get building that solid foundation without the conflict and without the disillusionment of the reality, the stronger your bond.
Okay.
Because when you start to deal with heavy issues very early on, there's really no foundation to be able to support those issues and hold those issues, because you don't really have a bond yet, a connection.
Right.
So yes, you would see that honeymoon stage that many people curtail by moving in really quickly.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's like honeymoon is kind of ending, and you've just really cut short probably the most fun part of the relationship.
Yeah.
Because it's no responsibility.
Yeah.
It'll never be
everything
like
is-
that again.
Yeah, those first couple, that first phase, with the first couple months or even like upwards of 2 years. And that's why, I know, like, 'cause I get so many dating questions. It's like, when do I maybe ask for exclusivity, or when do we talk about that? How soon is too soon? How much time should pass? Like, I don't want to settle or, right, maybe commit to someone that we're not aligned or have the same intentions or all that stuff. And so I try and help the flirties, help all the daters in that phase. But at the same time, it's like, being able to come back to your desires, your wants, being able to soothe your own nervous system so that you don't feel the need that you have to rush and you have to push something forward. Like, I think it's okay to you can still be intentional and purposeful, but still allow a connection to evolve. Like, that's
Organically.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. What I say to my clients when they start dating, and let's say they count by like 5 dates in, and I say, and everything is going good. Let's say 5 dates in. And they say, well, when do I have this conversation? I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
Give yourself 3 to 4 months to really feel through this experience with this person before you start laying on those big conversations. Because the relationship needs an opportunity. It's like still a seed. We need to let it bud just a tiny bit before you start seeing what's there.
Yeah.
And that takes some time. So I would say a sort of a kind of a common average, I say, is like 3 to 4 months, which for some people, they're like, I don't want to wait that long. It feels like too long of a time. And so then they rush it. And what we see is, serial relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I also want that foundation to really establish itself so that when you do start to have those conflicts and those differences, it's like if you're only dating because you're looking to connect or evaluate someone as a romantic partner, of course, but I also want you to see them as a friend. Like, could we even connect and relate to one another on a friend level? Like, is this someone I would even want that kind of relationship with? I think that's important too.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I've got some clients who right from the first date want to put it out there that they're looking for a life mate. And, that doesn't always go over too well.
Yeah, I get that question all the time, and I get into a little bit of trouble with it sometimes, because it's like I role play the conversation. You're on a first date. It's like, why are you dating? And then the other person says, I want a relationship. Why are you dating? Oh, because I want a relationship. Well, that doesn't mean you're going to have a relationship
tomorrow.
with
It doesn't
one
mean
another.
we're moving in.
No,
right.
No, yeah. And it takes a little bit of the fun sometimes, a little bit of the whimsy. It's like now you're dating to get to that milestone, whatever it may be for you. And actually, it takes you out of the dating process a little bit as you try and just figure out, trying to get everything into place right away.
Yeah, it is a very anxiety-provoking stage for many people. It's really that stage of the unknown, and the need to label it and understand what it is to really avoid sitting in the unknown. And this 100%. Is really where, going back to the nervous system regulation, this is really where regulating your nervous system so that you can tolerate those feelings of uncertainty and those feelings of discomfort and not rush to close that gap by labeling it prematurely.
Absolutely. Oh, yes, yes. Let's get into. I'm curious, as we're going to talk about a few of the questions that came through with regard to differences that the flirties have. But in your work with couples and even with solo, solo clients, what are some of those maybe big differences that seem to present themselves in your work?
So I would say big differences are if we think sort of relationally speaking, big
Mm-hmm.
differences would be people who are more, let's say one wants to address the issue, the problem that just happened immediately, and the other person needs time to decompress.
Okay.
I would say that's an extremely common one.
Okay.
And so to me, that goes back to their relational style. And so what I say to my clients with that, which for the person on the one side, they don't like to hear it, but it's that in any given piece of work, we can only move as fast as the slowest person. And if this person needs 24 hours to sit on this before they come back, we can't speed that up. And if you need to do it immediately, it is physiologically possible for you to slow that down. It's not physiologically possible for the other person to speed it up. It's like, we can't rush development, you know?
Okay.
In the same way a 1 month old, we can't make them crawl. We can't make someone who takes 24 hours to process it in 2 minutes. So I would say that is one of the, if we're talking specifics, that is a very common one. Who's ready to resolve this? And the person who needs to resolve it immediately is usually the person who carries more anxiety because they can't sit with the unknown and things being unsettled.
Okay. Okay.
So that's a big one. I would say another big one is really how we are going to, if we're thinking dating, I was thinking of people who are living together, but if we're thinking dating, the other thing we can think about is just really sort of like the differences between how social two people are. So one person likes to really go out and do things, and the other person likes to enjoy time at home.
Yeah.
And we see this also, like, depending upon what people do for work. So people who work from home all day, they might be ready to go out because they're working, they're by themselves. They want to be social.
Yeah.
People who are in an office all day and they're dealing with people all day, they just can't wait to be home and just relax. And so to me, these types of differences and any differences in couples, what I say to every couple is everything is negotiable.
Okay.
Everything in your relationship must be negotiated.
Okay.
And those who can't negotiate really struggle being in a relationship. And negotiating isn't settling and it's not compromising. It's a negotiation.
Right. Right.
It's like, you want to go out 3 times a week. I want to go out once a week. How can we, what's the negotiation there?
Yeah. Oh, this is so cool. I know you can't see my notes because we're virtual, but these are two of the biggest differences I had in my notes that the flirties told me. Like, these are the things that I'm dealing with. One being, I think this maybe classic anxious avoidant sort of dynamic of if you have a disagreement, if you have a point of conflict, if you feel like there's an energetic shift, right? The dynamics are moving a little bit where maybe communication was super consistent and now you're going a day and like, oh my gosh, what's happening? You're like, I need to resolve this right now. And the other person is like, I actually can't. I don't. And then the introvert extrovert difference.
Yes.
Yeah. So big.
Exactly. And when we see when we have the anxious avoidant couple, that is their biggest challenge, because what the anxious person needs is to be validated by the avoidant. And the avoidant really struggles with validating because they are a 1 foot in, 1 foot out kind of person, that if they give their partner what they want on their partner's terms, it really signals to them that they're going all in. And then that sends their own nervous system into fight flight. And then they do something to deactivate that intensity of the intimacy and they back off, and it makes the anxious more anxious. It's really the perfect storm.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are some communication strategies that we can offer the flirties that maybe you've seen in your couple work for when you are in, let's say, that anxious avoidant dynamic? How can you just negotiate, right, what's going on?
So the first thing I would say for a couple is, and let's assume that they're not like just 3 or 4 dates in. Let's assume that they're I could speak to it both. Let me say this one first because it's what's
Okay.
coming to my mind. Let's assume that they're both invested. Well, here's the first thing. If a couple is going to figure out how we're going to communicate together, they're both invested anyway. They're not doing that without a level of investment. So let's just say they're invested.
Yeah.
They're like, I like you, you like me. No, we're not in third grade, but we like each other. And we would like to see if we can make this work. But there are definitely some differences in our style that we need to figure out, right?
Okay.
So let's work with that assumption. So what I would say to that couple is, first off, motivation and desire to grow together has to be there, right? There has to be a mutual agreement on that. The second thing is there has to be an awareness of the dynamic. Now, this is a problem because most avoidants do not identify as being avoidant. They think it's normal because it's the only thing they know. But let's just assume that he's like, yeah, I've got commitment issues, or she's like, yeah, I've got commitment issues. Okay, I said he first because it's oftentimes him, but that's actually not true because there are research shows that it's more men, but I disagree with that because I think that there's a low self-report for women. I know plenty of women who are avoidant. Anyway, there has to be some kind of awareness of what the dynamic is. See, a lot of couples try to deal with this and there's no awareness. You can't make someone work on something when they don't even know that they have a problem. They don't think that there's a problem. And being an avoidant is problematic if you want to be in a relationship long term, right? So, and being an anxiously attached person is problematic if you want to be in a relationship long term. So you have to work on yourself. So that's going to be the second assumption I'm going to make, which is that they both are aware of like, yeah, this is me. This is my dynamic. They're coming in with some level of inner knowing about that.
Okay.
The next step is like, okay, let's come up with a plan about how we're going to deal with this. And what I say to couples is the anxious can have some language that they use with the avoidant to signal that they're going into that anxious state. Because what the anxious will look like, they will say things like, oh, I didn't hear from you right away. Is everything okay? And the avoidant will be like, of course. I mean, like, why wouldn't and everything be okay? Like nothing happened. Like what's, and it's like, oh, I just wanted to make sure because I didn't hear from you or things like that. And then the anxious is looking for validation. So the anxious and avoidant have to have some kind of agreement on how they're going to deal with their dynamics. So this is another assumption, which is that they're both willing to agree on how they're going to deal with their dynamics. So the anxious can say, hey, partner, I'm got some anxiousness stirring up in me and I just need to process it. And the avoidant has to be in agreement with processing that with the anxious and vice versa. Now, it's actually easier for the anxious to bring this stuff up because they live it and they know that it's anxiety. They don't believe that this is like normal and the way they should live, even though this is what they felt. I would say it's different for the avoidant. They actually don't really realize that that's not normal. And so the avoidant, once they come to terms with that, they need to be willing to acknowledge the ways that they deactivate their deactivating strategies, which is where they put distance between them and their partner, and be willing to be very gently called out on that. And I say gently because the avoidant, on the one hand, very much wants a relationship. Otherwise, they wouldn't try to seek out relationships. But simultaneously, on the other hand, they also are terrified. That's the 1 foot in, 1 foot out. They are terrified. So there's fearful avoidance and dismissive avoidance. And dismissive avoidance are a lot harder to deal with. They also can be kind of meaner, and fearful avoidance just are, it's just coming more from a place of fear. They're less dismissive. So in order for this couple to have conversations, they have to have certain agreements in place, I would say. Because what happens is communication strategies and tools fall flat when the couple doesn't have an agreement on how they're going to use them.
Okay.
So like I could use I statements from here until the cows come home. And if my partner is avoidant and it's just going to go in one ear and out the other because I have not cued them that this is really where we have to talk about the serious stuff.
Okay. That's really helpful in understanding that dynamic more. And now I'm thinking of the flirty that is, 4 dates in and they haven't established they're not, maybe talking, specifically about attachment styles or even, sort of aware of what that is, but just speaking to their own experience dating. Of they're feeling some anxiety, or maybe they're avoidant. They're feeling some fear, perhaps. They're dealing with, I don't know, some just core wounds, beliefs of maybe not being deserving of love, right? If that's part of it, perhaps. And so it's a tough spot to be in as the flirt coach, right? Giving people tools and strategies to communicate where they're at when, it's like you're 4 dates in and it's just, yeah.
Well, let me just address that for a moment. So the person let's just say person A and person B. Okay. So if person A is your client. Okay. So what I'm talking about with my clients with person A are identifying the dynamics they see in partner B. And then we are putting the pieces of the puzzle together to understand, like, okay, what are they presenting with?
Yeah.
Now, we have to be really realistic. I get really real with my clients, which is how I'm talking to you on here today, which some people might think like, oh my gosh, it's so negative. But it's like, I'm just being very real about what people bring to the table, right? Yeah. So much is possible, but only when people are committed to that. And this is what I say when couples come to work with me. Like, yeah, but you have to commit, right? So if you're working with partner A and they're on 4 dates with partner B and they're still getting inconsistent messages from partner B, to me, that's a massive red flag that indicates that this person has some avoidance style. And what I say to partner A, who's my client, I say, you got to think really long and hard if you want to spend a life with someone who's going to be just like this and not get better, unless they decide they're going to do the work. And are you willing to bank on that now? 4 dates in, because it is a long road working with an avoidant.
Yeah. And I answered this question recently on a Flirt Friday, and it's like if you're already struggling with communication after 4 dates, like this is a part of the foundation that may carry forward into a relationship. And so if like you're in that phase of getting to know someone, it's like, you want to be respected. You just want to be treated well, right? You want to be considered, right? That someone is thinking of you, even if it's super new, but you can't exactly place your expectations on somebody else when you're in that dance back and forth of trying to figure it out. So I'm more like, what are your standards? What are your boundaries? Like just date with so much purpose and clarity within yourself. And that is going to, in many ways, push the people away that, they're just not in that same space when it comes to dating. They're sort of in and out. They're more casual. They've got a roster. They're on and off the apps, right? If you're dating because you want the relationship, date like that. And other people won't be able, like, they'll fall to the wayside pretty quickly.
Right.
Versus saying like, this is what I want. This is what I'm looking for. It's inevitably the flirties are like, well, I feel like I must say that. I have to say my intentions and get that off on the table. Why are you dating, kind of thing. So talk about it, but also how are people showing up and how are you showing up?
That's a really important point, how you show up, because you will naturally draw people in or repel people based on that without having to go through the checklist in your mind about what you need them to present with. Because if you're coming to the table as someone who has a lot to offer and you're serious about a relationship and you're meeting with someone who's not, they're not going to be able to stand the heat, so to speak, and they're going to drop off probably pretty soon. So you don't even have to force that on the first date, because the problem with that is that if there is some possibility there, you're going to squash it potentially by talking about that on the first date.
Yeah, very true. And let's stay here for one more moment and just address this question very, very directly with regard to communication, because this is probably easily one of the top 5 dating questions I get, right? Where one person wants to text a lot, or maybe there was a bunch of texting in the beginning and it started to fall off a little bit. There's seems to be more often than not this mismatch in communication. So how can we navigate that difference?
Yeah, that is present in every dating situation, which is really hard. So I think that you set the tone for what that's going to be like in the beginning. And then when it changes, there's reason to question it. That's a very valid question.
Okay.
Like, now I'm not talking about people who were obsessive about it,
Yes.
like texting 24/7, because that's its own issue, right?
Yes. Yes.
Talking about people who, they text several times a day, and then all of a sudden it's like maybe once at the end of the day, or they skip a day. So I like to encourage my clients to look at patterns and just be
Yes.
mindful of them.
Yes.
And so if a pattern changes without explanation, I mean, that's worthy of a question. Like, hey, I notice, we were sort of really connected through our texts throughout the day in the first couple months, and they just seem to drop off.
Yeah.
And the response from the other person is going to be very telling, because they could say, like, I mean, I'm busy, like I'm busy at work. Or if they give a defensive response and you say it in a way that's really warm and inviting and curious, and you get a defensive response, that is something to be curious about. If you get more of a response, like someone who's more open-minded, they're like, oh my gosh, you know what? That's interesting. Now, I would just say to you though, Benjamin, and to your clients you work with, like, to me, if somebody's going to change the terms of engagement, there's a conversation that needs to be had first.
Yeah.
Whether you're together for 3 months or 30 years.
Yeah.
There's it's actually harder when people are together longer. And we see this a lot when people are together a long time. It's like somebody wants to do something different, and the other person's like I have a couple I work with, they've been married a long time, and she always let him make the decisions and deferred to him. And the last 5 years, she's found her voice, and now she wants to make decisions, and he's really struggling with it. Not that she shouldn't make decisions, but they're changing the terms of engagement drastically.
Yeah.
So if a couple is going to go from texting every day and getting morning texts and night texts, and then all of a sudden they're going to stop, that person is changing the terms of engagement, and that warrants a conversation.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've never thought of it in that way, changing the terms of engagement. But you're so right. That is very worthy of a conversation. Going back to what we've been talking about throughout the episode of letting a connection grow, evolve, that kind of thing. But still being really intentional. It's like if you're starting off texting 24/7 all day, every day, it's like you're starting at 100. Where can you go? There's no, on a scale of 1 to 100, you're already at the top. You can't communicate more. There's really only one direction for it to go, and that is to decrease, which is inevitably probably what's going to happen, because it's just not sustainable. So I see that happen quite a lot, those shiftings, those changes of dynamics. But I love your approach here. It's definitely something to be curious about, and it's worthy of a conversation for sure.
Yeah. And it also speaks to just tracking patterns. It's like,
yes.
And just being curious without judgment, like, oh, this is interesting.
Yeah.
He texts me or she texts me 10 times a day. That's a lot. Oh, that's interesting. Like, wow. Okay. So just letting yourself be curious. I look at it as just collecting data, and you just collect the data without interpreting it until you have enough data points from a variety of situations, right? We never make conclusions out of one-off situations. So I always say to my clients, just collect the data, which is also why I say, if you like this guy or this woman and you feel like there's a connection there, but you're not really sure where it's going, like, give yourself 3 to 4 months to just collect the data and see how it feels.
Yeah. Yeah. In the grand scheme of your life, 3 to 4 months is just not a huge amount of time. And it's not like this is the only thing you're doing, right? You're still going to school, working on your career, hanging out with family, friends, pursuing passions, hobbies. So life goes on and continues. Dating is just a part of overall what you do. And this is, I love this part of the conversation so much, because I like when there is some nuance in the dating process, and we can be with that uncertainty, some of that ambiguity, without jumping and rushing to conclusions. Like, I'm thinking of a client I worked with, a little while ago, and they were feeling the pullback from someone they were dating. And in the past, it would have been like, oh my God, they're cheating, right? Something's happening. They're back on the apps. I just know it, because that was what had happened to them in the past. And so I get that. That was a familiar feeling that they were relating to a past experience. In reality, they had the conversation, and this person, it was still pretty new, and they lost their job. And they were very embarrassed about that. They didn't know how to share that with someone that, they had only known for a couple months, 3 months. And then I had a couple calls with this client. I don't have like the update, but from what I heard, that conversation went well and they were able to get back onto, okay, we're reading the same book again and understand one another. On a little bit deeper level. Yeah. It's just communicate.
It's a really good point because we actually don't know what's going on with the other person. And there are things that aren't going to be talked about that early on in a new relationship without somebody, not having the trust developed there yet. So I think to your point, it's like, also giving people the benefit of the doubt and staying open-minded to see what where they're at with why this shift.
Yeah. Yeah. And there couple more kind of two topic questions that I wanted to get your thoughts on. Yes, in the episode today, I think let's do this one. How do you, is there a point when your differences become too great to try and even work through or try and understand? Like I'm thinking about deal breakers, right? Like how do you know maybe when it's just, we're actually just too different?
So I would say the only real deal breakers are going to be lifestyle factors and value-based factors. So, so I want kids, you don't. I want to raise our kids I want to be this religion, you don't. I want to be religious, you're an atheist. So those are sort of value-based, we would say, and then lifestyle-based. It's like, where do you, when you have completely different visions of where you want to go in life. So one of the things that really drives longevity is A, the history, but B, the desire to grow old together. And if you have really different views of what it looks like to grow old together, then it's going to be really hard to sustain that. So for me, deal breakers are never really personality traits or things like that, because as I said, everything can be negotiated unless it's a lifestyle factor or a value-based decision. It's like, kids can be negotiated too, but someone is going to be giving something up. Like that's a very obvious giving something up. And somebody might give up having kids in the service of being married to this person because they really want to be married to this person. But you have to do a lot of work to get behind a decision like that in order to give something like that up. Same thing I would say goes for religion. Now, what I've seen in the last 8 years, I would say, is couples who have really become divided politically.
Yeah.
And whereas before you could have a moderate Democrat and a moderate Republican be married and they could be fine because they maybe just sort of socially they saw things the same, or fiscally they saw things the same, and then maybe socially slightly different. But now we see these extremes that the division that we see, not to get into politics, but the division that we see between those parties playing out in our everyday life. We do see that. I see that in couples. So what I see actually now for couples, or actually not couples, for people in their 20s and 30s, that has actually it's gone on their list of non-negotiables.
Yeah.
Like, I need someone who philosophically is actually more aligned with me. And that is valid. I get that. Like, I mean, we just think about some very basic philosophical choices in that. And I think that those could be really divides for people.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I call them the big three in dating, right? Kids, religion, politics.
Oh yeah.
So if these are big.
Right.
They can be really lightning rods, where if you're in agreement, or maybe you're both on the offense, maybe, about something like kids or something like that. So can you build that foundation, negotiate your relationship, your connection, or are one of these things or all of these things deal breakers for you? Like, is it just a point of difference that actually this isn't going to be a fulfilling relationship for me if we cannot align on one of these value or lifestyle factors? Yeah.
Yes. And that's something that I think gets to be fleshed out by the 4-month mark. You would know, you would generally know that, which is also why I say to clients, give it 4 months, because you can feel these things out. Because if you really want kids and the other person's like, I don't really know. I could, if I found the right person, I would. Well, okay, that's not a no.
Point. Yeah. The Flirty submitted a few questions about those, each of those as differences. And in our time remaining. This has gone by so quickly. I want to ask you about conflict, right? Tease that at the beginning of the conversation. So giving the flirties some tools, maybe some communication one-liners, so to speak, for just how to embrace points of view, perspectives, and have a dialogue, a conversation versus a you did this, you did that kind of argument, perhaps.
Yeah. So what I say about conflict is that every conflict is an opportunity to learn something about our relationship and grow from there.
Okay.
And so when we have that reframe and we approach it that way, as opposed to someone has to be right, and then if someone has to be right, that means that someone's wrong. So first order of business really is a reframe on how we think about conflict.
Okay.
And conflict I'm not talking about in the honeymoon stage of relationships because there's usually not much, but after the disillusionment stage and they move into the sort of the responsibility stage, we start to see conflicts. Yeah. And that's really after you're out of the honeymoon stage and you've really developed this bond and connection, all the good feels, then you move into really sort of where you're actually working on the building blocks of what the relationship is going to be like.
Okay.
And I mean, conflict is an opportunity to see our differences, to see how we relate differently, to see what we feel passionate about, because generally we're not going to get into conflict with someone unless we feel really strongly about something.
Yeah.
So first off, it's an opportunity for growth. And if we look at it that way, then we can take a curious mind with the other and say like, okay, that's interesting. You are feeling very X about A, B, and C, and I feel the opposite about that. And that's really interesting. I think we need to sit with that, but we have to respect each other's position on this.
Yeah.
And then what I say to couples is you never have to finish those conversations in one sitting. And in fact, I encourage couples to start a conversation, see how far they get. And if they find that they're spinning their wheels, just say, you know what? I think we've done as much as we can in this sitting. Let's shelve it and we'll come back to it another time.
Yeah.
And conflicts get more complex as couples are together longer. You know, you're more involved in each other's lives, you're more intertwined, and they get more complex. And therefore, it's not as simple as I want sushi tonight, I want pizza. So I always say to couples, start by reframing what conflict is. And then the next stage is really to come to a place of understanding, which is not the same thing as agreeing. And when you can understand where the other person is coming from, you can see them. And when we see people, it's very disarming. It really lets the guard down.
Oh, I'm having so many thoughts where what's sticking out for me is that it's not a point of conflict and argument. It's not about having a winner and a loser and I'm right, you're wrong, or coming to this maybe an agreement, but more so an understanding of how we can understand one another more deeply and then grow from this. So we can hopefully not repeat a pattern, right? If we seem to be having the same point of conflict or the same conversation over and over again, and just relating it to, my work a little bit, I see, the same thing where it's like, ultimately a conflict is like you don't feel seen, you don't feel valued, or you don't feel understood. And so how can you express what that actual underlying want and desire is, and then have a conversation about it versus like you did this, you did that, and now you're blaming. It's sort of going into that realm a little bit, which we've all done. You can feel very emotional and very hurt.
Yes.
But how can we,
And when you address the heart of the matter, which is the hurt or the wounding. The defensiveness drops away. And so does the conflict, because that's what that's about. So one of the things I say in my work a lot to couples who are married is you can be married or you can be right, but you can't be both. And it's true, because if someone is right, it means the other person is wrong. And no one can sustain living in a relationship where they feel like they're wrong. My husband and I were joking at lunch today about something. We went to lunch earlier and I was listening to a message. It was a noisy restaurant. I was listening to a message on speaker and he was looking at me and he was like, everybody's looking at you. And he's like, can you like lower that? And I'm like, nobody else can hear this. They're all talking. And so he said something like, you don't like to be admonished. And I'm like, reprimanded, he said. And I'm like, absolutely not. I don't like to be reprimanded. And he wasn't really reprimanding me, but it's true. Like, now I will say to you, so we're married for 20 years. So I'm laughing about that. But I could tell you that in the first 5 years of our marriage, before we had done all the work we've done, or even when we were dating, I would have gotten so defensive, so reactive, that would have turned into a big fight. But now we just sort of laugh at it, and I turn my phone off and I listen to it when I get in the car because it's not a big deal. But it's really when you develop that kind of trust in your partner, that you trust their motive and you trust they're not out to get you, you can hear anything from them.
Yeah, that's so good. I wanted to ask you one more question here that came through about sort of those quote unquote little things, right? So the example here is you're starting to date someone and you're going over to their place for the first time and it's messy, or right, like sort of the little things. Do they matter? They
shouldn't, because what happens with the little things when you love someone is that they drop off. So my husband's very type B. I'm very type A. He's grown a lot over the years to be more organized. He's not messy, but he's just not as organized as I am. And I've grown over the years to really relax on that. Yeah. But if I made the judgment call based on the house that he lived in with other guys as to whether or not I could spend my life with this guy, I wouldn't be sitting here right now with him. Yeah. Because he was not very neat. So I would say the little things, unless you're like a highly sensitive person to certain things, and there are people like that. Like if you have a very highly sensitive nervous system, the little things are going to bother you from a sensory place, like a messy, disorganized place. But technically, the little things shouldn't matter. Okay. And they matter when people become hyperfixated on them. There's something going on with a person who becomes hyperfixated on it, in that they have their own internal anxiety and there's a need to control, to make the other be like them. And so maybe there's a sort of a perfectionist quality. This is one of my main focuses on my work, is specifically women who do this with their husbands. And these are women who generally have serious control issues, which comes from fear. So it's like, if they have a messy house and you don't, and you end up living together, you set the bar. And so I say the little things should not matter. Are there any little thing examples? Like I've heard things like, they don't cut their toenails, they don't manicure their nails. And I say, well, you know what? You just say, like, it would make me feel so good if you could do that.
That's helpful. Yeah, it seems to be, I get a version of this question around something like cleanliness, hygiene, right? Their beard is scratchy, or like their hair is maybe too long and it, I don't know, gets in your face or something like that, So like it tends to be something like that versus the little things of we like different styles of music, or like one person's a vegetarian, vegan, and the other person isn't, kind of thing. I don't really usually get like the little things, quote unquote, style of question around that. Yeah. Sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I still say those are the little things that shouldn't matter. And again, if somebody's sensitive to something like your beard is scratchy, it's like, if somebody cares about you and loves you and you say your beard is scratchy, they'll say, I'm going to go shave it right now.
Heck yeah. Yeah, if you were to tell me my mustache is scratching you a little bit, I'm going to take care of that.
Right.
Because I want it to be an enjoyable kissing experience for you as well. Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah, the flirty asking the cleanliness question. I know they weren't coming into my apartment, but that's very much me. I mean, if I am going to host someone, right, the first time they're coming over, I'm going to pick up a little bit. But honestly, I'm a disaster. I'm extremely messy. So it is not likely going to be up to your standards if you're...
It's such a good point, though, because you also don't want to make it look like you're like this hyper neat freak the first time, and then they're shocked every time they come over after that, which is also why I say to clients, like, be yourself. I mean, and when I say be yourself, it's like, again, you don't let it all hang out, but you let some of it show, but be yourself, because if you're not yourself, you're going to be drawing someone to you who's actually not a match for you, because they think you're someone else.
Exactly. Really coming full circle to where we started.
Totally.
This conversation in many ways. Carrie Cohen, this has been I can't wait to debut the episode. If you're listening to it right now, it's out. This is the debut. I want to, final question here. Just any last thoughts or words for the flirties?
I would just say that dating is not for the faint of heart. It is a game of endurance, and it is an opportunity to do lots of your own inner self work should you take that on. And
absolutely,
I say take every opportunity that you have with someone you date as an opportunity for you to learn something more about yourself and grow from there. So it's just part of the developmental cycle in the stage that you're in right now, and use that as an opportunity for growth. And I find that when we can reframe things that are like arduous, effortful, difficult, not going as quickly and smoothly as we want, when we can reframe them as like, okay, what lesson can I extract from this? That we then feel like we're getting something out of, like the pain, if you will.
Sure. This is very much my approach and philosophy as the flirt coach, is dating also as a tool for healing. It's going to be, it is a marathon. It is not often a sprint. It's going to be wrought with painful, heartbreaking experiences at times, moments of anxiety, frustration, overwhelm. Will this ever happen for me? I'm giving up. I get that all the time. But I really hope this conversation today will be empowering and impactful and instill hope and belief. And I don't have to think that. I know that it will. I know it.
This has been so fun. And so I love talking about this topic. So it was so interesting. And your questions were extremely thought-provoking.
Good. And only last piece, I will have it all linked in the show notes below. I want to send the flirties to your socials, to your programs, how they could work with you.
So you can come to me on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, although Facebook is not too much. And I've got on my Instagram, my website and everything is linked. And I do solo work and I do group work, but that's for women only. But all my work is for anyone solo and any couple.
All right, Carrie, I'm going to have those links below. Send the flirties your way. Thank you so much for being on Flirtations today.
Thanks for having me, Benjamin.
That's a wrap on this episode of Flirtations, a conversation all about conflict, communication, differences, and do the little things matter in dating with Carrie Cohen. Thank you so much, Carrie, for coming on the show today. I was excited to put this together as, yes, we met several years ago in a coaching cohort, and a really cool and beautiful full circle moment for me, and I think for Carrie too, to collaborate, reconnect in this way to create this episode for you all. So thank you, Carrie, and thank you to you, the flirties, for listening, for tuning in, for streaming. I hope you really enjoyed this episode and you're enjoying the show. Yeah, I love putting this out for you and just hope you get what you need, what you're looking for. You get some tips, some tricks, some strategies, blending those two words together, but also some healing and some understanding, and that you just feel seen by the show and my content, because that's what it's really all about. Yeah, so thank you for listening. Please rate, review, subscribe to the show if you haven't already. If you have, thank you so much. Yeah, share this with one person, anyone, just the last person you texted you, someone in your phone list, in your DM list. Yeah, share this show and let's spread BFE, Big Flirt energy, all over the world. Yeah, I think that's what I want to say today. Okay, signing off officially here at Flirt Headquarters. My name is Benjamin. I'm the Flirt Coach and Gay Libra Flirty. Happy flirting.